What is worship? As I ask that question, I think of auditoriums full of people singing It Is Well. I think of sitting with members of the youth group in deep prayer. Or I think of times sitting around the living room with my family during a quarantine, taking the Lord's Supper together. Is that worship? It sure can be, but I don't think it always is. You see, worship is more than just singing or praying or serving or fellowshipping. All of those things are forms of worship, but they can also be done without worship. Taylor Swift sings all the time. Is she worshiping? Volunteers at your local animal shelter are serving, but are they worshiping? There have been times where I have sung alongside my fellow Christian brothers and sisters and did not worship. So what is worship? Richard Foster puts it this way in his book, Celebration of Discipline. Forms and rituals do not produce worship. We can use all the right techniques and methods. We can have the best possible liturgy, but we have not worshiped the Lord until His Spirit touches our spirit. Worship isn't just about singing or praying or serving. There's something deeper. The Israelites were really good at worshiping and yet not worshiping. Listen to what God said through the prophet Amos. I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring me your choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. You see, these people would gather for worship. They would bring their sacrifices and their songs and their prayers, and yet they weren't worshiping. And God says He hates that. Paul gives us a better idea of what true worship is in his letter to the Romans. He says this, "Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." See, our worship is not just something we do on Sunday morning when we gather together in the church building. Our entire life is an act of worship. Micah puts it this way, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before Him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." God prefers us to live a righteous life than to lift up even 1,000 songs of praise. The songs are good, but as Richard Foster says, if worship does not propel us into greater obedience, it has not been worship. Now, don't hear me say that our coming together and singing, praying, fellowshipping, communing on Sundays are unimportant. They're hugely important. It is important to offer up our words of praise to God, the only being that is worthy of such praise. I like the way Dallas Willard describes worship in his book, The Spirit of the Disciplines. Willard says this. He says, "In worship, we engage ourselves with, dwell upon, and express the greatness, the beauty, and goodness of God through thought and the use of words, rituals, and symbols. We do this alone, as well as in union with God's people. Worship is a time to engage with God, to dwell upon His Spirit, and to express just how wonderful He is. But if we are not called into greater service through our acts of worship, then has it truly been worship? If we are not living the way God calls us to live Monday through Saturday, does He love our worship on Sunday? God calls us to worship, and He wants us to praise His name. But we do this not only through the songs we sing, but more importantly, through the way we live. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true worship.